program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the Eau Claire Area School Board.
Hello, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order tonight. Maida, can you confirm that we are in compliance with open meetings law?
Yes, we are.
And if you would do a roll call to verify our quorum.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Zur?
Here.
Commissioner Bika?
Here.
Commissioner Clemens?
Here.
Commissioner Harder?
Here.
Commissioner Lyons?
Here.
Commissioner Nordin?
Here. Our first order of business tonight is a closed session. I would hear a motion at this time to go to closed session under 19.851C. We will be discussing superintendent evaluation. So moved. Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned to closed session. We will reconvene in open session at approximately 7 p.m. Thank you. I'll call the meeting back to order for our open session, or took no action during its closed session. At this time, those who are willing and able, please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we do each meeting, we'll start with our public forum. The board allows up to 4 minutes for community members to address the board. The board will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor any person connected with the school system in a public forum. Tonight we have one member of the public who has signed up to speak. That is Kristen Nelson.
Great, thank you very much.
Ms. Nelson, if you could please give your address before beginning. Thank you.
My name is Kristen Nelson. I reside at 343 Bartlett Court in Eau Claire. I just wanted to call in to voice my support for the Eau Claire Police Department. I believe that the department is a model that has earned the respect of communities locally, regionally, and nationally. They work tirelessly to earn the community's respect and be inclusive. And recently, I was very encouraged that they had a whole female shift of officers. First and foremost, this is in regards to the last meeting. We were talking about school resource officers and interactions with students. We do not engender confidence and promote trusting relationships by isolating people from different backgrounds. I do believe that we should look into the reasons why some members of the community and some student groups have more interactions with police officers, and I think that the department will probably welcome that as well. But I think some of the comments from the board were a little preemptive, and I think cast a lack of confidence in our police department and these specially trained, hand-selected officers who work in our schools. I think a school is a place to build relationships, and all people at some point will interact with the police, whether it's in a community outreach event, patrolling the neighborhood, getting a traffic violation, a welfare check, or something more serious. And school is a place where different experiences can be acknowledged and addressed, and a foundation for the future can be established. I think you can safely promote trusting relationships at schools between students and officers. I was in high school when Columbine happened. It was a high school very much like the ones here in Eau Claire. It was a community of 60,000 people, and there were 2 high schools. The following year, my high school had the most bomb threats in the nation. We were evacuated almost every day for the first quarter. We had lockdowns before they were drills, and I remember specifically being locked down in a practice room and fearing for my life and crying with other students because we didn't know if it was real, because we thought it was real. The teachers thought it was real. And we had a school resource officer, and there was some comfort for me as a student back then, and then as a parent today, sending my kids to school, knowing that there was somebody trained to be in that school. We are in the midst of a school safety crisis. It might not feel like that because of COVID, but I just need to mention Sandy Hook, Northwestern, Virginia Tech, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, among countless others. There was one in Red Lake, Minnesota. And my confidence and my feeling of safety in a school was shattered long ago. And I think we need to do what we can as a community to make sure that students feel safe. And I think that involves inviting and encouraging interactions with trusting police officers. Finally, a year or so after that high school experience, there was a nearby high school where a young female student was sexually assaulted in a stairwell. And I think the statistics show that 20% of all women will be sexually assaulted. I would really encourage the board to encourage police officers to be in school to build trusting relationships with females in particular and other vulnerable groups, vulnerable to sexual assault, which is everyone, so that they know that they can file an accusation, it will be taken seriously, and that their rape will be tested. So I think that schools are a place for police officers to really start a positive relationship with students, and I encourage the board to always keep that in mind as we move forward with some of those inquiries and decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our Superintendent's Report. Superintendent Johnson.
Good evening, Chair Nordini, board members, student representatives, and executive team members. I have an update from each school level. High school first. On Saturday, February 20th, high school students from across Minnesota and Wisconsin gathered online due to COVID-19. Despite the situation, the goal for the Japan quiz hasn't changed. Namely, it is to increase cultural awareness and understanding and to bring together students who have an interest in Japan. The high school students competed using their knowledge of Japanese language and culture. Teams of students from each school competed in 3 levels of difficulty, Japanese levels 2, 3, and 4. Students participated in a round of questions regarding Japanese culture and language. The winners will virtually visit Washington, D.C. to compete in the National Japan Bowl. Memorial High School students placed first and third in the quiz bowl. Level 4 team of Emily Fletcher, Pajai Kang, and Maisi Yang took first place. Level 3 team of Henry Loomis, Henry Navarro, and Gage Winson took third place. Congrats to Hiroko Nagai and her students on this accomplishment. At the middle school level, I was able to participate in some instructional walkthroughs at South and DeLong last week, visited a variety of classrooms and noted the students' awareness to the teachers' learning targets multiple times during their lessons, with attention to their virtual days when not in person. At the elementary level, I visited classrooms at Putnam Heights and Meadowview on Friday. These were interesting visits as I was able to witness how critical our essential learning outcome pacing across schools needs to be. In 2 different 5th grade classes at both schools on the same day, staff and students were engaging in the draft of a 5-paragraph essay on whether or not to offer chocolate milk in schools. Putnam students would not let me leave until I provided my opinion with evidence. I was all for it. With 9 days until spring break, we're most concerned with preparations for our elementary schools return to 4 days a week of in-person learning on April 5th. Our most recent discussions have been more on the logistics and operations fronts. Transportation, seating arrangements, lunch, dismissal, and the shifting of physical materials have been the priority for this past Monday's elementary principals meeting. However, our discussions early this week will focus on our essential learning outcomes and in the near future. After our 3 principals groups had met on Monday as a large team, our principals have continued to work closely with their staff, especially their elementary specialists, and focusing on the very few forward-age students and how best to serve them. At the secondary level, our principals have been planning, developing their systems, and connecting with families to bring more students in person. Attention to underrepresented groups of students, 612, credit deficient students, and other students who can easily, and other students who will be able to be identified in cohorts A, B, and C from staff members. The secondary principals have submitted plans shortly after the February 24th special board meeting for even more support in CARES funding, which Abby Johnson helps compile and is sending for reimbursement to DPI. On the vaccination front, originally the last wave of eligible K-12 staff, secondary teachers, and central office personnel were scheduled for next week. However, the health department informed us on Thursday to be ready to go as they were informed from the state that 400 doses were available at Memorial on Saturday from 10 to 2. I was able to participate and receive my vaccine at Memorial on Saturday. Tremendous organization, dedication, and volunteerism by the Eau Claire City County Health Department and all who pitched in. We anticipate elementary staff will receive second doses before spring break, during, and immediately after. at secondary will receive their second doses early to mid-April. We can't speak positively enough of how Dr. Kai-Ying Zhang and Kim Kohler have collaborated with Kay Marks in the HR department to lead the process so well for our entire staff. This week is extremely busy for executive team and principals as we're staffing for next year. This is a collaborative effort with members of the executive team participating in specific parts of this process with our principals. We're also preparing for summer school and for a welcome transition to a 5-day school week next year. Thank you.
Thank you. The past 2 weeks have been busy ones for the board and for me in particular. First, a quick update on our governance structure policy work. We have completed drafts of all 4 sections of proposed board policy, with a few remaining comments on governance culture left to discuss at Policy and Governance on Thursday, and a few rewrites for the group to think about in board superintendent relations submitted by Dr. Beacon. They have currently been compiled in omnibus format for board members and the administration to consider. A draft annual work calendar for the board has been created by Commissioners Harder, Lyons, and myself, and the executive team is evaluating it to help ensure that results and operational expectations policies will be evaluated and monitored at annually appropriate times. Tonight, of course, we have a work session where we welcome back Jan Berg and Steve Tempest from DeForest to share more about their meeting structure. And the board will meet for a special work session on March 29th to work on our draft policies as a whole before formal consideration in April. In other efforts, after our last meeting of the board, I reached out to Deputy Police Chief Thomas regarding the district's SRO program. He and I had a very productive conversation about our shared commitment to the district and department working toward the same goal in this process: positive impact on our students. I also spoke with each of our district's current student resource officers, as well as others in ECPD leadership. They were all candid, sincere, and direct, and I appreciate that from each of them. Each of the SROs invited me to visit their schools and speak with them in person and get to know them and their work firsthand. And so I did. Last week, I was able to visit 4 of our 5 schools that have SROs, and we'll visit the 5th tomorrow. I also met with the principals of each building and was able to hear their insights on the SRO program directly. I appreciated the opportunity for all of us to confirm that we are not enemies or rivals, but instead teammates in this process looking to create a plan for success for our students. I am, as is the entirety of the board, committed to listening to all those who are involved in working toward change and justice within our district. We all will come to the table together to work toward positive change. Part of my focus as board president, especially since the death last summer of George Floyd, has been to bring forward a direct anti-racism and anti-bias conversation and framework to our district and to our board meetings. I don't do this on my own, for my colleagues on the board and a great many staff across the district have joined in this effort and have been working toward it for much longer than my tenure as president. But I take seriously my position of leadership and my role as a white man of privilege to use this responsibility to talk about racism, justice, and the need for structural change in our district. This is not laid at the feet of specific individuals, but is a collective call to action and need for change for all of us. I acknowledge that I will not and have not always chosen the right words to express this, and I accept responsibility for that and will work to do better as we have this conversation among our district and our community. I recently read an article that noted that one of the benefits of an anti-racist focus is the ability and freedom to acknowledge racism, even in ourselves, and then begin to work to dismantle it. I will continue to examine myself and work with the district to examine itself and its structures for evidence of inequitable opportunities and outcomes for students and staff in the district. When those are inequitable on the basis of race, I will note them as racist outcomes, just as I will acknowledge, when appropriate, other outcomes as classist, ableist, sexist, or any other. We must work to acknowledge the structures that impact our schools in order to address them. As long as I lead this board or serve it in any capacity, I will continue to have this conversation with and learn alongside our district and community. Thank you. At this time, we'll turn to our student representatives report. We'll start this week with our representative from North High School, Zoe Wolf.
All right. Can you hear me?
You can.
All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you are having a great day. Last week, juniors across the district completed the ACT. It was a stressful week, but I think I speak for everyone when I say I'm glad it's over with. It was a great relief to finish such a stressful time. Many students are also excited about the fall and spring sports seasons beginning. Students are looking forward to potentially being able to attend the games as well. If students are able to safely go to games, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to. North Student Council is continuing to plan many exciting events around the school, including a few school-wide intramural sports events, a spring variety show, and mainly prom. We have been working especially hard on prom to ensure a fun and safe event for the upperclassmen, while a less formal event the Friday night before. We look forward to getting everyone together after a long year of being apart. Also, our music programs have begun to come together as well. Choir is having a concert next Thursday, which is March 25th in the Doghouse. Orchestra is planning to host a concert sometime in April or May, and band will continue to play at sporting events like they have been doing so. Finally, I would like to speak on the school resource officers. I believe that police officers allow students to develop positive relationships with law enforcement, which they may not have if they didn't have that opportunity. They also provide an extra level of protection that would severely be lacking if the officers were not present. Speaking for North, our previous officer, Chaz, was well known and liked among the students and staff. He developed many positive relationships around the school that many of my peers greatly appreciated. I acknowledge there are issues with demographics that need to be worked on, but by working alongside the officers to fix these issues, they will have far better outcomes. These are issues that need to be fixed district-wide to ensure that our schools are the best they can be. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. We'll now turn to our representative from Memorial High School, Emery Toole.
Hi. Tonight I want to start off on a really big positive note. In the month of March, band, orchestra, and choir will all have the opportunity to perform at Memorial. This marks the first time in over a year for many music students to perform. When I was in the school last Friday for my own rehearsal, I was actually pleasantly surprised to hear a jazz ensemble rehearsing nearby during our break. That is not a sound that I've heard in about a year now. However, I do want to raise some student responses to the data that we were presented with on March 1st regarding the SRO program. I did send a much more detailed email to the P&G committee, and I'm happy to send it along to other board members if you'd like to see it. But for now, suffice it to say that students were incredibly upset by the disparities they saw and want to see at minimum further research into these disparities and the role of the SRO program in our schools, and they want to see that any reforms necessary to make this program equitable be enacted.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our committee reports. We'll start as always with budget development. Commissioner Harder.
Thank you. Good evening. The Budget Development Committee did meet last Wednesday, and we started looking at the facility use question and fees around facility use. We did some work on that about a year ago, and we're continuing that work, picking it up again. We also spoke at some length about our compensation questions that we have, and the ad hoc committee that we're looking to assemble to talk about those questions. And we spoke a little bit about the increment question, which is a aspect of compensation for additional duties that staff take on, and which haven't been updated in quite some time, and we're looking to update those in 2 phases. The first phase being as soon as possible this year. And the Budget Development Committee will meet again next Wednesday. Thank you.
Demographic trends and facilities planning, Kim Kohler.
The Demographic Trends and Facilities Planning Committee meets Thursday, the 18th.
Thank you. LEAP, Jim Schmidt.
LEAP discussed the budgeting process for LEAP projects and for the LEAP committee. They also reviewed the innovation video, which is about 99.7% done and should be up on the website in the next few days. They also reviewed the Acres for Joy performance agreement, which they hope to bring to the board soon. And a couple quick updates on Arctic Zone and documentary theater performance review updates.
Thank you. Policy and Governance met on March 4th. We discussed Policy 511 rule regarding equitable recruitment and retention of staff. We've been working on this rule for some time to examine ways that the district can work to recruit and retain a workforce that reflects the diversity of our community. Feedback from district personnel was shared, as were ideas for further supporting equity, diversity, and inclusion at the staff level. At this point, the rule update is complete, and we've asked as a committee for a memo to be drafted to be sent to board members outlining the changes. As this is rule rather than changes to policy, no board action on 511 is required. We also received an update on work on Policy 411, Equal Educational Opportunities. Mandy Van Vliet and Kai Zhang shared progress and a plan for digging into this policy to make changes that incorporate recent Title IX revisions, as well as our district commitment to equity as a whole. This was one of the policies that came up in our first pass at changing the word handicap to disability in policy, and we realized that this policy needed a larger reworking. And so we've, of course, wanted to be intentional with that, and Mandy and Kai are going to work through that process and come back with recommended changes. Finally, we began the focus discussion of the SRO policy and its evolution. We discussed next step in examining not only this policy, but looking at ECASD policies and practices on a larger scale where it comes to student issues. The committee reiterated the board's commitment to look for creative solutions, to examine all of our alternatives, and to be thoughtful and intentional in changes to both individual programs like the SRO policy, but also the larger structure of the district. We recognize the need to be, again, intentional and thoughtful, to look at the data and hear the voices of many in our community. We will continue this discussion at our next meeting, which is scheduled for this Thursday at 1 p.m. At this time, we'll turn to our legislative updates. Dr. Johnson.
On Thursday, March 18th at noon, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards will host an hour-long candidate forum with Deborah Kerr and Jill Underley, who are vying to become the next Wisconsin State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The Wisconsin Policy Forum has released their state budget brief, which provides an overview of Evers' proposals while scrutinizing key areas of the budget that require attention regardless of what state lawmakers ultimately approve and send to the governor's desk. Additional federal funds may help to alleviate some of those concerns. For now, however, the governor's proposals aim to confront these challenges through large increases in discretionary state aid to districts and new policies for distributing it that seek to reduce disparities in education. President Joe Biden signed the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 into law. The nearly $1.9 trillion pandemic recovery legislation includes approximately $122.8 billion for K-12 public schools, about $7.17 billion for technology resources for schools to help close the homework gap, and $3 billion for IDEA, among other provisions. The bill also allocates $2.75 billion in dedicated funding for non-public schools. Additional information on the new act, including estimated state-by-state funding allocations, can be found in an analysis prepared by the nonpartisan Congressional Research Services. According to that analysis, on page 8, Wisconsin is slated to receive an estimated $1.54 billion for K-12 education via the American Rescue Plan Act. Governor Evers has announced a series of budget listening sessions dubbed the Badger Bounce Back live sessions. The session covering K-12 education is scheduled April 8th and will be covered virtually. Governor Tony Evers also suggested a waiver from the September 1st start date and robust summer school offerings to help address pandemic-related learning loss for Wisconsin K-12 students across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to our consent agenda. Board considers consent agenda items with one vote and without discussion. If a board member wants to discuss any item, it will be pulled out of the consent agenda and voted on separately. Tonight's consent agenda includes the minutes of March 1st, 2021, minutes of closed session, March 1st, 2021, financial report, February 2021, gifts in the amount of $9,229.05 for the period of February 1st, 2021 through February 28th, 2021. Payment of all bills in the amount of $10,397,740.58, and net payroll in the amount of $3,681,867.72 for the period of February 1st, 2021 through February 28th, 2021. Human Resources Employment Report, 2021-2022 calendar correction. Authorization to Executive Director of Human Resources. I would hear a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We need a roll call vote.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Zur, Commissioner Bika,
Yes.
Commissioner Clements,
Yes.
Commissioner Harder,
Yes.
Commissioner Lyons,
Yes.
Commissioner Nordin.
Yes. At this time, I will turn the floor over to Superintendent Johnson, who has an announcement regarding personnel.
Good evening. Ms. Coherent graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire in 2007 with a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary and middle education. In 2018, she also earned her master's degree from Silver Lake College in Educational Administration. She holds licenses through the Wisconsin DPI to work as a principal, to teach middle childhood, early adolescence, and to teach mathematics. In 2007, Kua started with the Eau Claire Area School District immediately after graduating from UW-Eau Claire. Her first position with the district was as a first grade teacher at Locust Lane for 1 year, and then moved to Flynn Elementary as a first and second grade teacher beginning in 2008. She worked at Flynn until 2020, when she began working at Locust Lane as a teacher on special assignment. Since 2018, she has also worked as an associate professor at UW-Eau Claire, where she develops and delivers Hmong language content. We're excited to announce that Kua Vang will be the principal at Locust Lane Elementary, starting with the 2021-2022 school year.
Thank you. On behalf of the board, I will wish Kua the best of luck. We're all very excited for the leadership that you'll bring to our district, and we know you'll be successful. At this time, we will move on to our individually considered resolutions. We have one tonight. It is regarding health insurance. We had the administrative recommendation for our health insurance last time at our board meeting, and we moved it here for action tonight. We were presented with three possible choices. And Abby, if you would please just remind us what the administrative recommendation is and just the briefest of summaries on what that looks like for us.
Sure, thanks, Chair Nordin. Wanted to let you know that the three recommendations or three proposals that were provided, and the first one was a 7% increase, and there was no changes to the plan design at all. The second one, which was proposal B, had an increase to the district that was less than the 7%, but that related to changing the labs and x-rays. And so what would be covered would be that the lab draw and the x-ray picture would be covered, but the reading of those tests would not be covered. And then, or it would go towards our deductible and co-pays. And then the third proposal that was out there had the change to labs and x-rays, and then in addition, increase the maximum out of pocket. And so the recommendation from administration was to go with proposal A, which was the 7% increase without any plan design changes.
Thank you, Abby. Are there any comments or questions on the health insurance item? Otherwise, I would hear a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the 21-22 health insurance renewal.
Can you specify which option, just since we use three?
Option A as presented in the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is approval of option A for health insurance for next year. In that this is a financial item, we do need a roll call vote.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Zur,
Yes.
Commissioner Bika,
Yes.
Commissioner Clements,
Yes.
Commissioner Harder,
Yes.
Commissioner Lyons,
Yes.
Commissioner Nordine.
Yes. The motion passes. We will now adjourn to committee. We have one committee report tonight and several policy reads. I think we will get through them all before our work session, but just as a reminder, if we run up to 8 o'clock, I will ask for a motion to adjourn to a work session at that time, and we'll pick back up any policy reads that need to happen after that. Our first committee report tonight is the winter activities updates. I will turn it over to our athletic directors and assistant principals.
Good evening, everyone. This is Mike Pernsteiner. I'm the athletic director and assistant principal at North High School. I'm joined here with Kevin Thompson from Memorial. Just like to say thank you, first of all, to the exec team and the board for inviting us to take a few minutes to talk about winter athletics and activities. And just to mention, I could kind of hear in our student representatives some excitement in their voices when they talked about some of these activities, and it's just a really good feeling in these positions to hear that. So I just wanted to mention that, and I'll let Kevin Thompson introduce himself here.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Kevin Thompson, assistant principal and athletic director here at Eau Claire Memorial. And again, thanks for having us to share our successes, our celebrations that occurred during the winter season. So we're excited to present this to you tonight. And Marissa, if you don't mind, could you move on to the next slide? So what we'll be presenting to you tonight, you'll notice that they'll be aligned with many of the elements, the bullet points that you see within the strategic plan. And I know many of you are familiar with this. So when we take a look at the challenges that we had and the strategies that we had incorporated or evolved around those challenges, we needed to incorporate a symptoms checklist prior to each and every practice and contest, and that symptoms checklist was normed through the Eau Claire City County Health Department and the WIA. And so we found that to be a very effective measure in mitigating the risk that many of our student athletes encountered, and really we didn't have community spread whatsoever. In addition, we looked at face coverings for all coaches, players, and fans throughout the season. I was very impressed, to tell you the truth, by all of our players. To wear a mask throughout an entire event is very challenging. And our coaches and our officials and were very effective in making sure that this was covered. We also looked at limited spectator attendance, and attendance lists were also provided for each and every contest. They were provided from our school for away contests, and for those opposing teams coming to us, the same thing. And with the limited spectator attendance, again, provided by the guidance of the Eau Claire City County Health Department, we were sitting with about 2 home family members for each and every athlete. Social distancing was also taken into consideration and paralleled what we do in our classrooms. And I think because of these effective measures, we were able to sustain and maintain a season that lasted, well, to be honest with you, I think Mike and I weren't so sure in December. But then as we continued and we practiced these strategies, we actually were able to maintain a whole entire season. So we were very thankful. We were excited for our community. We were excited for our athletes. We were excited for our school.
And thanks, Kevin. Some of the additional things that we did with our programs is we tried to group our students by levels, number one. So like our freshman teams, our JV teams, and those, up the line, we're practicing and traveling and things in groups together. So that way, if we did have any issues, COVID related that, we can mitigate, the spread of those kind of things, but also helped us with any tracking that we would potentially need to do throughout the winter. So a little more challenging for the coaches to do that, but we really appreciated the efforts of not only coaches, but the families and players as well, because sometimes it meant a little bit different practice schedules and things of those sort. We were also bound by some facility limitations. If you've been at either of the two high schools, some of our gym space has been repurposed for lunchroom space or classroom space. So it meant that maybe scheduling practices a little differently or sharing some spaces and things. But as Kevin mentioned, just really pleased with the cooperation from everybody involved throughout the winter season, with the ability to cooperate and share space and do those kind of things. Also some restrictions with locker room access. Didn't want to put 100 students in a locker room all at the same time, so it meant maybe spacing of groups going in and out of locker rooms and things like that. And then lastly, probably one of the biggest challenges for Kevin Thompson and I was with some issues with ice rink availability. With two boys teams and a girls team to schedule both practices and contests. It made for a little bit of a challenge, but once again, very cooperative group of players, families, coaches, the community, a lot of community help from some of our neighboring communities such as Altoona, Chippewa, Menominee, and so made for what could have been a potentially a real tough winter season go a lot more smoothly. Kevin and I just wanted to share some numbers also with the participation numbers both at North and Memorial. So what we have here are the numbers of participants in our different winter sports seasons at North High School. If you take a look at these numbers, they're actually quite strong. I would say at most maybe one or two athletes one direction or another from a typical winter season, which was encouraging because I know, as I said earlier, I know our students were really excited to get back to some sense of normalcy, and I know that athletics and activities really provide that for a lot of students. So we were very pleased by the participation numbers going into this winter. And I'll let Kevin go to the next slide and share a little bit about Memorial as well.
Thanks, Mike. And if you look at our numbers, we do have a few more sports that are illustrated in comparison to North, and the reason for that is we're at lead school for a couple of them in reference to a co-op. So, for instance, when you take a look at our swim and dive program, that's the boys swim and dive, that is a co-op program that exists between Memorial and North, where we are the lead school. Gymnastics is also a co-op sport where we are the lead school. And as Mike mentioned, the numbers are very impressive, I would say, especially given the pandemic, which to me illustrates that our students, not only do they want to showcase their talents in the classroom, but they also want to showcase that outside the classroom. And again, I couldn't be more excited for them. Our season successes, and I know we're probably getting close in reference to our 10-minute time frame, but I'll take the first two. When you look at the overall season, our teams actually completed 75% or greater of a full schedule in a shortened season, by the way. Typically, your winter season starts around November, beginning of November, lasts end of February, maybe middle of March. This year, we started in December, and we ended approximately around the middle of February, end of February. Again, credit goes to our district leadership, working with the Eau Claire City County Health Department, working with the WIA to have these protocols in place, and then with our coaches preaching those protocols to our players embracing it. That's why we've had so much success. And that's why we've had minimal pauses in season due to COVID. And I'm glad that we could showcase the fact that we could do it. I want to add another bullet point to that, and that would be our GPA. Mike and I were able to gather some information, and this is not scientific by any means, but just a small sample space of our winter athletes, looking at their overall GPA at the end of first semester in our winter athletes, where they had a mean average of a 3.34. Quartile 1, the 25th percentile, that was a 3.026. The median, the 50th percentile, was a 3.47. The 75th percentile was 3.83. And the max that we witnessed was a 4.0 with many of our students. But to me, what's significant about this is that when you take a look at the 25th percentile, 75% of our sample space is 3.026 or better, which goes to, I guess what it shows to me, the importance of being a student athlete, or to have a student also involved in other co-curriculars such as forensics, drama, you name it. The two go hand in hand. We notice that when kids are participating in all these co-curriculars, GPA is increased, behaviors are decreased, or misbehaviors, I should say. So once again, to me, it illustrates the importance of our co-curricular activities.
And I'll just finish this slide up here. You know, a lot of times out of difficult situations, some really good things emerge. And one of the things I really was proud of, both at North and Memorial, but with the support of our exec team and IT department, we were able to live stream every event this winter, including the freshman levels or JV levels or those sports seasons that typically don't have the ability to be live streamed just because of location and things like that. So every event and every level provided an opportunity for whether it was parents, grandparents, relatives, or students that wanted to watch their classmates participate. And one of the other really neat things that came out of it, and I know both sides of town do a really nice job with their entertainment technology classes. North was just fortunate enough to be featured in a news story, but they also featured a group of our students during the state basketball tournament. So if anybody watched that, they had a feature during one of the games where they talked about the entertainment technology students and the work that they do to put on a show really for all of those. And it's just a great, if you get opportunity to watch the live stream of either North or Memorial for any of the events, it's all student driven, and the work that they do for that group of students is just amazing. And they really love that, and those kids take that to heart, and they're really learning some skills that they'll take with them with beyond high school. So just a really neat thing to come out of a tough situation.
That's a good point, Mike. And if I could add to that, our instructors with the entertainment technology class, they deserve a round of applause as well. Because without them, I think many of our kids wouldn't be able to showcase their talents as well.
And I know we're probably pressing up against time here, but I'd just like to go through, you know, we had an unusual winter season, but not just the same, you know, at the end of the season, you know, kids want some opportunities to kind of showcase their talents and see where they can go with things. And we were fortunate enough to have state tournament series at the end of our seasons, which some people were thinking maybe wouldn't happen. So our girls hockey team, which is a co-op between both North and Memorial as well as Altoona, made it to the state tournament, which is a little unusual because the first round was actually in Chippewa Falls, but we played in that state semifinal game. Both the North and Memorial boys basketball teams actually played each other in the regional final. Girls basketball, NHS girls basketball, were regional champs, but they ended up with the 11-win regular season, which is just a huge turnaround for that group of kids. Our dance team over here at North, always a strong program, competed in what they call the Badgerette State Championships, and they ended up champion in two different events there. And then both the co-ops of gymnastics and boys swim and dive both those teams were team state qualifiers in their respective sports. So that's a huge kudos to those two teams and their athletes, their parents, and their coaches.
Other things to acknowledge is that our MHS and PEP band performance did occur at our games. It took a little bit of staging on our part to make sure that we met the recommendations set forth by the Eau Claire County Health Department, but we did so and staged it out where there's 6 feet of social distancing. And to be honest with you, that adds such a huge element to each and every game. There's no way around it. And for those of you that attend any contest, okay, any sporting contest, and then you add our band to it, nothing better at all. We do have concerts scheduled for spring and actually right now. Tonight, Eric Dasher led the band in a virtual performance. He also did last night as well. A phenomenal job, and once again, he was instrumental along, and I want to give kudos to our custodial crew and help staging all this. Everybody was phenomenal, played an important role in making this happen. Go ahead with the last part there, Mike.
Yeah, and to lead on that, North, the band, choir, and orchestras, as Ms. Wolf had pointed out earlier on in her presentation, have concerts scheduled, and they'll be a little different. We'll have to do them in the gymnasium. We'll have to spread some things out, but we've got kids practicing show choir after school on Thursday evenings in the commons. Band practices, orchestra practices, and it's just really a good feeling to hear those kids, making music again in our buildings and being excited to be back together, in person. They've done a lot of those things virtually, and I will say it took some planning both on our part, Kevin and I's, but also the directors of those programs to figure out ways that we could safely bring students together in those events, and so they've done a great job, and we're real excited as we move into spring. I know it's hard to believe we're talking about spring because what it looks like out there today, it's not exactly tennis or golf weather that Kevin and I were maybe hoping for, but it'll come back around here. Forensics and drama, they're continuing to do some things. I know that forensics had done some things virtually last spring and continued to do that as well. Same with drama. And then lastly, our student council, especially over here at North, I guess I'm not as familiar with Memorial, but Ms. Wolf pointed out some of the things that are going on here. Our student council has got activities for students going on all over the place, whether it's virtual trivia and outdoor games and things like that. So a lot of things taking place here for students to be more involved with their schools beyond the school day, which I know that it is a huge part for our students. I hear that from them every day and from their parents. So, Kevin and I are excited about these kind of things, and we really appreciate the time to be able to share them. And, we hope going forward now through believe it or not, this is our fall season for us in sports, and then we will get into our spring season. But hopefully, in a month or two, we can come back and report on those seasons as well.
If you step outside, it doesn't look like fall, does it? But in conclusion, I just want you all to know that there was a few comments that were shared with from our coaches, and I just wanted to relay about 2 or 3 of them. From one of our coaches, kids universally commented on what a joy it was to simply play a season. Here's another one where they specified the team mindset was that they could do this and have a successful season, but not just in terms of wins and losses, but simply just playing together. And in the end, our team and kids were simply resilient. They showed great character throughout the entire season, even though they had many distractions to overcome. I think those are some of the values that we often want to see out of our kids. It's not about wins and losses. It's about these values, these core values that we continue to preach day in and day out. And they embraced it. So, like Mike said, thank you for your time. We appreciate it greatly. And thank you.
Thank you, Mike and Kevin, for sharing with us. It's always, especially this year, a great thrill to hear some of the positive things coming out of work that we're doing and the steps we've made to keep people safe. Are there any other comments or questions from the board? All right, well, thank you. And we look forward to hearing more with our adjusted fall season and of course in the spring as well.
All right, thank you.
We'll now move on to the next item, which is discussion and possible first reading of changes to policy 441.2, student representation at school board meetings. This came to Policy and Governance actually as a request from a student in the Eau Claire virtual school, saying that they had interest in participating and lending their voice to the student representation at our meetings. This obviously seems like a great idea, and so we went back to look at the policy and have made some adjustments so that it does not read just for North and Memorial, but it is in fact open to everyone. So if I could have someone who'd be willing to read the changes, we just need to read items 1 and 2 there on the screen. So if someone would be willing to read that, that would be appreciated. Commissioner Clements, sorry, I think about 4 of you jumped in. And,
that's fine, it's a short one.
They're all pretty quick tonight. That is our hits for this policy night. Go ahead, Commissioner Clements.
Thank you, Dr. Nordine. There shall be, the following are hereby endorsed by the Eau Claire School Board, stipulating the requirements for student representation. 1, there shall be a seat for 1 student representative from each high school to the board of the Eau Claire School District. 2, any registered student shall submit application to represent their school to the principal by the 2nd Tuesday in April.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board on this item or the proposed changes? Dr. Beacon.
I wonder if the committee considered having student representatives on any kind of a rotating basis from year to year. And I ask, I guess it's a companion question. If you have representatives that are not specific to a school, but more have a charge to be kind of the voice of, kind of the voice of students in the district, that it might even open up to represent, the middle schools or perhaps at elementary level. I just wondered if you talked about the, kind of what different functions or purposes these representatives would serve.
I will turn the answer to that question over to either Commissioner Clements or Dr. Johnson. I was unable to be at the meeting at which this was moved forward, and while of course I support these changes, I wasn't there for the discussion. So if either of you would like to jump in and talk about that question, I'd be happy to hear it.
Yes, so Dr. Beacon, the conversation more in terms of a rotating basis was between those 4 representatives, that 2 of them would be present during school board meetings and taking a synopsis of everyone's concerns and reporting out. The extensiveness to including middle school and elementary, that was not part of our discussion. Our discussion centered around the addition of representatives from the virtual school as well as the charter school, and so that was the extent. But allowing that 2 representatives of those 4 be present during school board meetings and then share feedback for all 4 of the entities involved, and so that's where the conversation kind of went when we were discussing it.
Hearing no additional comments or questions, I should probably try to get harder on the screen. I don't see it.
Could I just say something?
Yes, sorry. I was just waiting for the video to pop up. Yes, please.
That's okay. I really like the idea of including the virtual option because, especially moving forward, I think it would be really hard to talk about the virtual option if you're not involved in that. But I don't I know it might get a little lengthy if we were to have 4 representatives, but I feel as though it would just be really difficult to report on a school or a model that you aren't a part of. Like, obviously, I feel very passionate about the things I talk about with North because I'm either involved with them or know people that are, so I have connections. But I just feel as though it would be difficult to report on a school you're not in. But maybe you could do like every other meeting. You have 2, and then they only talk about their school. But other than that, I really like adding in the virtual model as well.
Thank you.
Could I follow up on that?
Yes, please.
I would say in the grand scheme of how long board meetings are, I don't think adding like an additional 4 to 6 minutes for 2 more representatives is that big of a deal. And I would agree with Zoe that I think it would be important for students to speak to their respective schools and to what's going on at their respective schools.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Pika.
I guess I find I'd like the opportunity, I guess, you to talk a little bit more about the role. It doesn't have to, I don't know when that would happen, but the role of student representatives. Are they to really represent their school, or are they representing a larger student voice? And I think I really am thinking quite intently about the middle school students' voice and even perhaps elementary. How do those voices come forward to the board? And that might be perhaps changing the role of the student representatives. It's probably, well, I'd like to hear more about that if the committee's talked about it, or if there would be an opportunity to talk about it.
My impression was that the implementation of how these seats would be, used would probably be a decision that superintendent and the administration would work on. I know that Superintendent Johnson has taken time to meet with Zoe and Emery regularly, and I think that he would probably, or the admin team would be best positioned to make some of those decisions. The policy here is really just opening it up so that we can have that additional representation. Although, if that discussion comes around to what that role is, we could certainly adjust, that policy could certainly be adjusted in the future to include, more representatives and, but the actual implementation, I think it's not something that we discussed, at least in the meeting that I was there, although. Go ahead, Commissioner Zerb.
Yeah, I think that considering that I think Superintendent Johnson has mentioned that this is an area that he's interested in growing or expanding or changing or differentiating. I think it would be how those positions are used. I think it might be best to see how that could work out from their end and then shift the policy at that point. Is that something we could do? This is obviously just kind of opening it up for additional representation in the coming year, and then if that were to change in the future, then
Policy can be adjusted in the future. Right now, we can't, by policy, allow representatives outside of 1 per North and 1 per Memorial. So without that change, we can't.
Yep.
They can't follow the policy and move forward. Mm-hmm. The policy can continue to be updated.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner, just to follow back, I agree with Commissioner Vika. I think that how we hear from our students is really, really important, and it shouldn't just be limited to high school. But I think there should be a system underneath how that is used and how they're communicating and how they're presenting to us, but I'm not sure we're the right people to develop that system. That's the question.
So at this point, we need the pleasure of the board whether the policy can move forward or the consent agenda at our next meeting, or whether or not it needs to come back to P&G for additional work. Unless, yeah, Commissioner Clements, are you unmuted? Sorry, you were right behind
Yes.
the little arrow. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Clements.
Thank you, Dr. Nardine. I recommend that it move forward. In the discussion at P&G was, I think, thoughtfully arranged that it was not specific on how it be implemented on purpose, so that we could be inclusive as to our high schools in any number of them that we may have currently or in the future, and that we leave it to the administration to determine how best to implement, whether that's everyone of the representatives speak at each meeting or some mix. We would best defer to the administration and how that would be implemented. But other than that, I'm good with how it's written.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll second that.
We don't need a motion technically, but we will then move it forward to the consent agenda next time. In that it's 8 o'clock, and I know that at least our guest Steve Tempest is on at this time. I will ask for a motion to adjourn to work session. We will reconvene in open session to finish the policy readings after our work session. So if I could have that motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, so we are adjourned until 9 o'clock to our work session. So I'd like to welcome back Steve Tempest, and I think Jan Berg was planning to be here, though I'm not sure she's been able to quite get on yet. Last time we had kind of an unstructured question and answer session about coherent governance, the model that we're considering moving forward here quite soon. This time we are going to talk specifically about how meetings will run, or how meetings at least run for DeForest using this system and how it might look differently. So if we can get Steve, I think has he been promoted yet to, just looking through the list. Yep, we can get Steve on and ready to go. I'll turn it over the floor. I asked Steve and Jan to sort of share some of the basics of how they operate using this system, and then we will open it to questions from board members at that point. So Steve, if you are available to unmute, we'll let you take it away.
All right, good evening, and thanks for having me. I believe Jan's going to be joining us in a moment. And I would appreciate her perspective as well from the board chair perspective. Just a few things to get started. Our journey to coherent governance. I feel I've been on the board for 16 years now, and I feel we've always had some version of policy governance, which I felt to some degree kept us out of the operational detail of the district. But I don't feel we lost control. In fact, there's a number of examples where I feel we had great control because of our governance model. But we did evolve to the coherent governance model, which I think added greater discipline to our approach. And part of that discipline was in the way we ran our meetings. So prior to that, under policy governance, I felt like we just had some general principles. So things like, try to keep it at the policy level, set policy, make sure administration meets your expectations. But we never had as much written down and measurable agreed upon goals. And so that's really what changed the format of our meetings. One of the other principles that we adopted with the change to coherent governance is we committed to making a focus on one thing. And the one thing that we chose was student achievement, because any school district could choose any number of things to focus on. You could say financial management and taxpayer, prudent taxpayer, watching out for the taxpayer. Or you could say, a staff-oriented goal, but we chose student achievement because we felt like if we kept our focus on student achievement, all the other things would follow. So with that, then we started structuring our meetings to say if that's what the board sees as a number one priority, then that's where the board should spend most of its time. And that was a real eye-opener because when we visited our agendas, not only one agenda for one evening, but agendas, we have two meetings a month. I'm not sure what your pattern is.
We also have two.
Okay, so we really don't get a big chance. We don't have committees, so we don't have a lot of time to spend together. And if we think back to the our only authority comes from when we're sitting around together with all voices. That's not a lot of time. And if we spend that time getting reports on, there was the facilities people bought 2 new mowers, and we're going to have some summer help with that. If we spend a lot of time on that, that's all that all comes at we don't have as much time to spend on talking about student achievement. So once we became more sensitive to that, then we structured our agendas to focus on student achievement items. And so if we have an agenda that becomes light on student achievement, our board members are sensitive to that, and we will typically make a comment. We can't always fill every agenda. There's many things a board needs to do, and we can't always fill our agenda with items that are only student achievement. There's many other items we need to talk about. But once we became sensitive to having the student achievement item, then we prioritized having more time set aside for that. Administration started delivering reports that were oriented towards student achievement. One of the other, before I forget, one of the other sort of principles we used, and this comes straight from Coherent Governance, is the difference between student outcomes and what we kind of call wing flapping. Have you guys worked with the Coherent Governance consultants at all, Randy and Linda? Okay, so they kind of pounded home with us that there's two things. One is something they call wing flapping. So that's saying that would be administrative reports that would say we hired 2 new learning coaches. We're doing workshops for all the new teachers. We've purchased a new curriculum for math. All the doing things, but that's referred to as the wing flapping. And the outcomes, though, are where are our free and reduced lunch kids with 3rd grade math achievement? That's more outcome oriented. And so it's not that the process things that we talk about are unimportant. We wouldn't get anywhere if we weren't doing those things. It's just that we used to fill some of our meetings with a lot of that, we're starting a work group, we've purchased this, we're doing this, we hope to do this. And we've switched the amount of time we've spent to spend more time on getting reports from administration on how students are doing in the multiple areas of achievement that we would like to improve upon. And the board, I'll speak for the board, I think we find that our meeting time is much more productive. What I've found, though, is that it requires more energy on my part. I come to meetings and I have to be prepared. We will get reports ahead of time, and it's my responsibility to take a careful look and to have questions prepared so that I can make decisions or take action based on that. So that's probably the biggest piece that I've seen with our board meetings. I think one of the other things is, and again, just a principle that we use is every now and then one of us will say, you know what I'd like you to do? And we'd point at the administrator and say, I'd like you to make 20 more student parking spots out in the parking lot, because last time I came for the basketball game, there was no, and those students had to walk from 6 blocks away. It's a safety hazard. And more often now we catch ourselves doing that and saying, this is not the time and the place for making individual direction to the administrator. We'll check our policies. We can have individual conversations with a superintendent if there's an issue, but we spend much less time providing individual direction, which I don't feel is appropriate anyway. But we spend much less time doing that, and more time focused on the results and the operational expectations that we spent time preparing ahead of time. We spend more of our time working on those types of things. I just want to stop here. Is this sort of what you were looking for as far as
yes, I think at least from my perspective, just starting to dig into what do meetings really look like, how are they different than perhaps we've run them before. We can read through the source materials, but talking with other districts who are actively using this governance model and getting that real life perspective on how does it actually work. And one of the questions that I have, and then I'm sure we'll have a number of them, but you sort of mentioned how your board self-monitors as you get into, about that parking lot or about the individual. And it's your responsibility as a board to monitor your governance culture and the relationship with the superintendent. How does the DeForest board go about that? Do you have a debrief at the end of every meeting where you talk about how do we do, or what policies do we need to do better, or do you do it less regularly than that? And what are the mechanisms for that?
Yeah. So you're going to pull it all out of me, aren't you? So this is sort of a confession time. So yes, we do a debrief, and I'll circle back to that too, because I think that's critically important. The other thing is, I've noticed we've had to become a little bit more mature in understanding that we can kind of be direct and confront each other without losing friendships or losing our collegiality as a board. But as being direct and reminding people, hey, we only got a few hours together. We got to make this efficient. And if we're going to spend time talking about parking spots or things like that, we're missing out on the critical need we have in DeForest to advance student achievement. Our parents, our taxpayers, that's what they keep their eye on. That's what they are most interested in. And we feel committed to delivering, and it's difficult. There's more times where we feel like at the end of the day, we have more improvement to make. It's not like just flipping a switch and saying, we're doing great now. So you never really let your guard down along those lines. The debrief at the end, a couple things there. One is, I think it's critically important. The other thing is, everybody's tired at the end of the night and they just want to check out and leave. And so they all it was a good meeting, and then we go. So we have to remind ourselves and do something purposeful to try to take it seriously. It's a good time, and I think people are very careful to maybe use themselves as an example or something like that to say, I think I kind of wandered off topic here, and I was drilling in on one little item when we should have stayed focused, or I asked too many questions and I didn't give administration enough time to make a full presentation. Things like that. We have a governance officer And that's just somebody on the board who takes on the role of being governance officer. And it's sort of a thankless position because ours is Sue on our board, and she oftentimes has to interrupt people and remind them, what our principles are and what we want to be focused on. A good example of that is when we're doing our monitoring reports. The monitoring report is presented by the administration. The superintendent is primarily responsible, but oftentimes the superintendent will ask for other administrators to help with the report. During the report portion, they go through numerous pages of reports, numerous subsections. The board simply listens to the report. We don't ask questions, and that's kind of odd because typically a board shoots their hand up during any other presentation and says, hey, I don't understand, this or that. During that portion, though, we let administration speak, and then we then take possession of the report. And once we have possession of the report, then we, as a board, discuss it. We don't necessarily wait for the superintendent to kind of provide direction. We, as a board, then own that report, the monitoring report, and we discuss whether we think the superintendent's recommendation should be accepted. So it offers a nice opportunity to fully understand a report before we shoot a lot of questions. Oftentimes, I felt like sometimes during presentations, we never got to the finish line because we asked so many questions, sometimes way off the mark. I can remember, I've been around for a little while, I can remember certain board members who would have their pet question, every presentation they would ask about, this one thing, or they would talk about how their fishing buddy who's a taxpayer wants this to happen. And we would spend time doing that every meeting. So I feel like it's added a little bit more discipline. So that critical piece at the end of the day has helped focus a little bit. We also do a board self-evaluation. We take it very seriously, but we still need a lot of support from our admin. She needs to remind us to fill it out. It's a good check to make sure we're still staying between the fence posts, that we're not getting out of line. It's also a nice way if, say, you would have a new board member who would maybe not quite understand their role and maybe be wandering away or doing things that just weren't acceptable. That's a nice way to bring and have that conversation in a better way with a board member to kind of keep people moving in the right direction.
Commissioner Lyons?
Yeah. Just a follow-up question to something that you said. You said that you do not have committees. And I would assume that the reports that you're receiving, that a committee had worked on that report. So what you're talking about is not having a board committee. And then if that's the case, then I'm interested, because we're having this kind of discussion right now about budget and about being a fiduciary. And we're thinking and contemplating the idea of putting together an ad hoc committee that's faculty, staff, to look at compensation, salary, benefits. And the budget committee, which is the board, would be that group that would charge that committee to do X, Y, and Z. And then that budget committee would receive that report from the ad hoc committee, but there still is a board budget committee. And I'm wondering, do you have an audit committee? How are you a fiduciary as a board without having some sort of entity that's taking a look, even at a 30,000 foot level, at numbers?
So we do, the entire board does, however, not a committee. So we do it as a committee of the whole. We do, just let me be clear, We do occasionally have ad hoc committees, but the very definition of that is it's time limited. You know, there's a purpose to it, time limited, and then it ends. And we even have to remind ourselves that, you know, why is this ad hoc committee still functioning? That should have been, you know, completed its work and be dissolved, you know, over a period of time. So we do our work as a committee of the whole. So we get our audit, financial information, all of our state authorizations we need to make. We take care of as a committee of the whole. So we've eliminated the other board committees like finance and personnel and things like that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so I guess it goes back to you talking about doing quite a bit of pre-work before that committee of the whole, because the difference in being able to have a work session in committee and in a full board meeting, just for me, it's just a bit different.
And I don't know if, I mean, it's a little bit of it's a lot of trust and a lot of trying to determine where control, how much control you have and how you define that control. So, for example, we just reviewed some audit information, and that was a massive pack of details. And I would be fooling myself and all the other board members if we felt like we memorized that entire packet of information. However, our finance director is responsible for making sure, she's not, the superintendent's responsible for making sure the school district stays on good financial standing. And so ultimately, he is responsible for that. And if he tells us through the monitoring report that all of those monitoring elements have been checked, then we as a board, once we look at all the evidence of that, all the measures and all the evidence, then there's a level of trust there that we say, yes, there's 12 items here that we're measuring to demonstrate that you are providing good financial management of the school district. We put our stamp approval on it and trust them on that. We still have to review audit information and a lot of that, but at some point, we've asked the superintendent to be to provide a report that we're having the management we expect of the finances.
Thanks.
Yeah, Commissioner Zerk.
Steve, can you talk to the time frame? If you're getting that level of information, how much time are those materials being provided to you, to board members ahead of the meeting?
Not enough.
Okay, fair enough.
No,
Similar.
I mean, because what is enough? You know, when you, wow, that some of that stuff is pretty intense, and the district does their best to provide. Our district admin, she's wonderful, and she's very good at hitting timelines and things like that. And she works very hard at making sure the materials are ready for us as soon as possible. But it never seems like it's enough. It always seems like, you know, we're pouring our weekends, time like that, into checking over some of those things. We have one of the things, we have the luxury of having long-term, say in the case of fiscal management, of having a long-term, very professional, very successful manager. And as time goes by, same audit company comes in, as time goes by, you start to loosen the grip a little bit. You start to have a little more trust. You're not combing over everything as fine as you would, because we also are backed up with our policy that we have guarantees that we're going to follow the law, that we are doing the proper procedures, So when we get the audit report, we get the summary report, we can look at that and get assurances that we're doing things okay.
And then how many items are you covering in a meeting? Like what is a typical, like what's a typical meeting structure looking like? 'Cause I'm just wondering, like, if you're not doing any work in committee and you're getting that level of oversight as a full board, and you're not just trusting. So right now, like, we're just, I mean, for me, I'm brand new, so I don't sit on any active committees right now. So I'm just kind of like listening to these guys who've done all the work, and I'm like, oh yeah, well, they've done all the work, and so I don't have to, so I'm just kind of wondering, how many things are you guys covering as a group? And then how much pre-work then does that mean? Because if you're doing 4 big things or 5 big things or 6 per meeting.
Yeah, I'm just looking at our last meeting agenda. We did the basics: call to order, pledge of allegiance, mission and vision, approved the agenda. We were going into closed. We have some staff recognition piece. Then we did report on our iReady data for literacy. We did presentation of the possible approval of our self-directed complex thinker results report. We did an update on our return to school plan. We're doing hybrid instruction right now, which I must say that since that has happened, that has taken up a large portion of what we could have dedicated maybe to something else, but it's so important that it's on every agenda. We authorized the clerk for canvassers, so some basic stuff. We had public input, and then we went to consent agenda and the superintendent's consent agenda, and convened into closed session, and that reopened, and did our debrief, and that was the meeting. So really focused on kind of, if you asked me what the meeting was about, I would have said mostly about the iReady data and the return to school plan. So it feels like a meaty meeting. And that's something I'm proud of. I think we've evolved to doing more board things during the meeting than we used to. I feel like we used to sort of passively sit and listen to kind of the stuff that was going on at school, and now I feel like we're more focused a little bit on our student achievement issue.
So Steve, I'll reach out to Ann, who for the rest of the board is the counterpart to Maida. And I'll ask her to send some examples of the agendas just for us to look at. Certainly when she sent over the monitoring reports, that was really helpful for us in thinking about what those might look like. So I'll do that, and I'll share that folder with the board to look at example agendas. I might pull some from some of our other partner districts as well.
One of the, if I can just kind of make a point to, one of the things I felt, and I always, whenever I talk with other board members and somebody says, I don't think we like policy governance, or I don't think we like coherent governance. And I always say, do what works best for you. I'm not just blanketly, but I find that I am a much better board member. I find that our board is much more effective. I find that we hold our administration and administrators are of a higher quality, and they come in and there's no playing around at board meetings. I think sometimes, if you want, you have a superintendent who's just good at playing the board, because I know this guy's going to ask for something, I know she's going to ask for something, and I'm just going to play it out. Whereas when we're doing the coherent governance piece, I feel like we've set expectations. The superintendent needs to deliver on those expectations, or we will have another discussion. I mean, we went through that. It was very crystal clear for our district to see when we had a superintendent who was a stellar person, a wonderful superintendent, wonderful. She worked hard, let's say that, but she was not fulfilling what the board had set out, and actually what she also agreed to. it became crystal clear that she was doing something a little bit different than what we wanted. Not in a bad way, but it just was, it wasn't going to be a good fit for the district. And then it was easy to say, this isn't going in the right direction. It wasn't a personality, well, it did get to be that, but it wasn't just, a popularity contest. It was specifically about real things, student outcomes, the way we were going to approach staff, the way we were going to approach families and student. And so I felt it made our board stronger during that process. And we were more effective and able to move on quickly and get somebody who could meet those needs.
So I'll specifically ask Dr. Bika, Dr. Johnson, Commissioner Clements, or Harder, if you'd like to take the floor for a question. We want to make sure everybody gets a chance to ask something if they'd like. And then Superintendent Johnson, I will offer you an opportunity after the board has had a question if there's anything you'd like to get some information about from your perspective.
As the non-committal coherent governance person currently on the board, I have no questions at this particular time, but I appreciate your comments.
So I'm sorry.
No, please.
I was just going to mention one factor that sometimes is pointed out to us. Sometimes somebody who they want to use the board in like a political way, or they think if I can get Steve Tempest, I'm gonna get in there and we're gonna get our way. We're gonna get fewer pesticides on the football field, or we're gonna do something. The one accusation we sometimes get is that we're a rubber stamp board. We're a rubber stamp board for the administrator. And I understand where people have that perspective, but it couldn't be farther from the truth. I feel I've been through 3 superintendents. I feel we hold our current superintendent to a much higher expectation and criteria than we did with the other 2 boards because of our monitoring reports and because of the process we do. The rubber stamp perception for us especially comes from, we spend a lot of time, so the superintendent spends a lot of time understanding the board perspective before we do any action. So in a meeting or 2 meetings or 3 meetings prior to any decision or action, the superintendent will ask us about our values. So we have a diversity initiative, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. And how will that play out? How are we going to implement that? What decisions does a district need to be make? Well, that's not just going to come to us one night and we're going to have a vote on it. We spend a lot of time ahead of time. We might even have outside work groups, or not work groups, but opportunities for learning where board members will go to sessions on diversity or learn more about what another district might be doing. We spend a lot of time with that groundwork. So when we do come to action, a lot of times, most of our questions have been answered. We fully understand. We've had opportunities to ask questions of key personnel of the superintendent. So usually what will happen is a short discussion, an opportunity for that. And a lot of times we have unanimous votes. And I think that leaves this perception that we just wait for the superintendent to say, we're going to do this. And then the school board goes, okay, that's what we're going to do. We're all in agreement. And I fully understand the perception, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. I think we have even greater control over the district than we did in the past. So that's one of those things that comes up frequently when people find out about policy governance or coherent governance.
Thanks, Steve. Any of my board colleagues that haven't yet had a chance to ask a question, if you have anything to ask? I got a whole stack of them, so we're in no worries about not fully using your time tonight. Superintendent Johnson, if there's a question that you'd like to ask, you're welcome to jump in as well.
Actually, I do, Steve. Just more of a for instance. So in preparing, let's say it's an aspect of student achievement in DeForest. You and your colleagues on the board have had discussions with the superintendent, 2 to 3 board meetings before the presentation and what you need. Let's say we gather the data on a certain item or certain things necessary for the board. What does that presentation look like? How many people tend to present? And then what type of dialogue do you have afterward? And how many agenda items would it take? Would it be just one with a longer presentation and question and answer? What would be a type of, I guess, an example of that you use in DeForest?
Okay, so that I like that to be able to paint a picture for that. So what we would do a lot of times would be not only have the preliminary discussions, but also have opportunities to learn. So for example, our learning director might talk to us about the research they've done before implementing a new process. So they would say, we've visited 4 school districts that are very similar to ours in the state of Wisconsin, and this is what we found. They would also maybe talk about some shortcomings with something. We are finding that our 3rd grade math achievement, students do well in 1st and 2nd grade, and then we see a drop in 3rd grade or something like that. And so they would identify a problem and say, here's where we're thinking about. This is a tool we think we could use to improve that. The other thing though that they might do is bring in some of the data people and say, here's how we monitor and measure data, so that the board understands sort of the mechanisms behind measurement, that we don't just kind of give everybody a smiley face and say you're doing okay in geometry, but that there's measurements, and also then what the staff do with those measurements. So before we even get ready to approve anything or accept anything, we have a full understanding of, or we should have a full understanding. It can sometimes be a little overwhelming, and that's another little point I'll get to, but we have a full understanding of, and usually in pretty good agreement once we understand what direction the district wants to go into. One of the things we did give feedback on, probably over the last couple of years, is the reports we would get from administration were sometimes too much. You only have so much energy. If you're thinking really hard about some of these things, if you're spending time looking at this data ahead of time, sometimes the board doesn't need every single little piece of information or it repeated 12 times. You need some examples. You need to know where we're going, and if there's enough evidence that we'll get there. And so as a board, we've given our administrators a lot of fine tuning on what we would like to see during the meetings, so that we can make our best decisions. Administrators tend to do what I talked about before with a lot of the wing flapping, because a lot of their energy is spent with developing work groups to come up with good results, with doing research, things like that. And absolutely wonderful and important, but that's not really helping us make the decision. What's helping us make the decision is, how are we going to move these students from this point to this point? And if you can demonstrate that, and it's in a cost-effective way, then and it looks like it's reliable and verifiable, we're all for it. So
thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to throw another one. I mean, jump in if you got more questions, but just a couple of other things is I also think the administrators tend to appreciate the feedback. I think our administrators, at least, it was pretty grueling for them to prepare presentations for the school board, especially when they weren't quite sure what was expected. And I think once we've provided them with feedback on what is important, it's allowed the administrators to come forth with a good, concise report, explanatory report that people appreciate. The guesswork is gone. It's a lot easier for them to prepare it and come ready to answer questions.
Steve, I want to ask you about sort of two items that you touched on a little bit about your board development. I think when you talked about, you know, the learning sessions that you have where district personnel are sharing with you the how, and of course that develops you as a board member. How else do you go about, you know, board development? And then I think the other part of that that I was just thinking about is how does the board then work for like advocacy at sort of the state level of policy? I'm thinking about the WASB delegate assembly, or, you know, working with legislators to say this is what we need in our district. How does that work into the board work? Is that on the side, or is that something that you address? So again, board development and additional advocacy, like at the state level.
So I think one important point and one thing that we kind of cherish and hold dear is the board sets its own development. So if we want development somehow, we don't allow the district to say, oh no, only one person per year can go to some sort of workshop or something like that. If we want to do something, then we say we're going to do it. I mean, we're careful with money. We would never do anything too crazy, but we do understand the value of development. And so we've had members go to the Coherent Governance sessions annually, 3-day sessions where they, you know, full-time working on coherent governance, you know, tune-ups and things like that. We do retreats and usually focus those retreats on either development or further refinement and understanding of an upcoming action. So oftentimes a retreat will be a good time to have better reports, sort of give and take with the board on some, you know, values types of things about the direction that the district should go. But also we have people attend the National School Boards Association. We have pretty good attendance at the Wisconsin School Boards Association meeting as well. So I think that kind of rounds out the development. Other things do occur though. We're in the, you know, the Madison area, and so there's a great cluster of school districts here, and a lot of times a school district will bring in a speaker or something, and then they will extend the invitation to other school board members. So oftentimes we have a lot of opportunities to attend, you know, a speaker on, you know, some topic. So we do that as well.
Thank you. Other questions from board members?
Oh, you had asked me a second part of that question, and I forgot what it was. I'm sorry.
Well, it's advocacy at the state level.
Advocacy. Yeah. So we are in a very fortunate position with our growing school district, and we're just very pleased with where we are. So we're very careful about being the loudest voice in the room, because there are as many districts that are struggling right now with declining enrollment, and I mean, they're looking at cutting math sections and things like that, and So we've kind of lowered our voice and felt like we shouldn't be the loudest voice in the room on some of these matters. There's too many districts that have some real concerns that need addressing before us. We do attend the School Boards Association activities, but I wouldn't say we are by any means, from a board perspective, highly activated as far as advocacy is concerned. Not that we wouldn't be, but we currently haven't been. There have been times in the past where I invited legislators to come and visit and have a chat, and then take a tour of the schools, and that's worked well. Relationship development, but our superintendent though is very active with advocacy, and so we kind of rely on him for that currently.
Additional questions? Well, it looks like then, Steve, we can actually let you get out of here a few minutes earlier than planned. I want to just express my gratitude and, of course, the board's gratitude for your willingness to spend these 2 evenings with us, answering questions and helping give us things to think about as we move forward. I think I can say for myself, we couldn't have done it without you. And of course, extend that gratitude to Jan and Ann. I will pre-thank in my next email as I ask for some of those agendas and whatnot. But it's been a real treat to have you, and we're thankful that you're willing to be across the state. The silver lining for COVID is that we can have guests from across the state and nation to do that. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, but the nice thing is I didn't have to drive to Eau Claire tonight in the snow. So I keep saying there's a lot of silver linings to this quarantine and stuff, because we figured out good ways to communicate with each other without having to be in the same room all the time. I wish you guys good luck. I know whatever you decide to do is going to be good, because you took the time to decide what to do. So that's great. And good luck to the Eau Claire School District. I have a good friend who used to teach there, and he had a wonderful experience. So, all right, thanks and good night. I'll share everything with Ann, and please, Ann is more than happy to help. Ann Stetbacher is more than happy to help out with any information. And if anybody has specific questions, you can email me, and I can. Also have Sue Esser, our governance officer, if you'd like to have questions directed to her, or if there's school district president issues that you would like, or even Eric. I'm happy to forward anything to all of those people. Eric is our superintendent, I'm sorry. So whatever you'd like. So thank you and have a good night.
Great. Thank you again. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone, for that time in work session. This time, we do need a motion to reconvene in our committee.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. We'll now move back into our committee agenda. The next item on the agenda is the discussion and possible first reading of changes to policy 536, professional staff resignation. My understanding is this policy adjustment is just to align with the staff handbook. Is that correct, Kay?
Yes, that's correct.
But I will just go ahead and read the proposed changes, and we'll open it for discussion. An employee may be released from his or her binding contract on or after June 16th with a 30-day notice and mutual agreement of the parties. Liquidated damages may be imposed by the superintendent or his or her designee for any resignation given on or after June 16th. Are there any comments or questions about the proposed changes? Hearing none, we'll forward that to the consent agenda for the next meeting. Our final item tonight is discussion and possible first reading of changes to 8 policies containing the term handicap. I will turn this over to Dr. Johnson to intro. He was the one that brought this to our attention.
Yeah, so for me, it was just the idea of that we're ensuring that an outdated term as it relates to handicap is replaced with disability. I know on here, if you read the report, it says major points says disabled, but it's disability. And so, and if you follow a lot of the moving past the terminology, really, a handicap is only there to tell you how horrible you are at golf. And so, you know, that's the only time you utilize handicap. So, did a really good job, and did a really good job of substituting where handicap was and replacing it with the terminology disability to make it more current.
In addition, we standardized the non-discrimination language in all of those policies that contained the term handicap so that we were consistent across the board and inclusive going forward. There are 8 policies. What I will ask, and the sentence is almost exactly the same every time because what we're doing is just substituting in standard language that helps to remove, as Dr. Johnson said, outdated language and standardize. What I would like is for us to sort of take turns reading them around the group, and you're welcome to pass if you don't feel comfortable reading, but we will start here in the room. I'll start with Dr. Johnson, we'll go to Commissioner Lyons, Commissioner Zur, then we'll go myself, and then I will ask, and I'll remind you when it comes to you, but then just looking at my screen, it'll go Harder, and then Clements, and then Vika. I'll go back to Dr. Johnson on the final one. So again, feel free if you're not comfortable to pass at that time. So Maida has up right now the first one, which is 346. And Dr. Johnson, if you would be so kind as to read us those changes.
Right, so if we go down to the last sentence there, the district should not discriminate in the methods, practices, and materials used for testing and evaluating students on the basis of sex, race, religion, color, national origin, ancestry, immigration status, creed, pregnancy, marital or parental status, physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression.
These are almost all of the same language. They're very standard. We'll read all of them and then open it for any comment or discussion that needs to happen after that. The next one is 361. Commissioner Lyons, if you would read for us.
The school district shall not discriminate in the selection and evaluation of instructional and library materials on the basis of sex, race, religion, color, national origin, ancestry, immigration status, creed, pregnancy, marital or parental status, physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression.
Thank you. Next is 377. Commissioner Zur, if you would read for us.
The school district shall not discriminate in admission to any program or activity, including athletic activities, standards and rules of behavior, disciplinary actions, or facilities usage on the basis of sex, race, religion, color, national origin, ancestry, immigration status, creed, pregnancy, marital or parental status, physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression.
Thank you. Next is 447, excuse me. I will read this one. The school district shall not discriminate in standards of rules of behavior, including student harassment, on the basis of sex, race, religion, color, national origin, ancestry, immigration status, creed, pregnancy, marital or parental status, physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Next is policy 460. Commissioner Harder, if you would read for us.
The district shall not unlawfully discriminate in the acceptance or administration of awards, scholarships, or other aids, benefits, or services to students, including those from private agencies, organizations, or persons, on the basis of sex, race, religion, color, national origin, ancestry, immigration status, creed, pregnancy, marital or parental status, physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression.
Thank you. Next is policy 511. Commissioner Clements, if you would read for us. I will note the removal of the term handicap. That might be the only one, so maybe I just stepped on your line there, Commissioner Clements. So this simply just removes the term handicap.
Do you want me to read the entire sentence?
Sure, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Maida.
If I can find where it starts. The Eau Claire Area School District is an equal opportunity employer. Personnel hiring and employment in the district are to be conducted as to not discriminate against applicant or employee on the basis of age, race, religion, sex or sexual orientation, gender identity or gender expression, disability, citizenship status, marital status, pregnancy, national origin, creed, color, political or religious affiliation, genetic information, ancestry, arrest or conviction record, military service, state, defense force, or any reserve component of the military forces of the United States or of the state, use or non-use of lawful product off school premises during non-working hours, declining to attend a meeting or participate in any communication about religious or political matters, or any other reason prohibited by state or federal law.
Thank you. Next is 821. Dr. Bika, if you would read for us.
Use of ethnic slurs, obscenity, profanity, or engagement in any conduct that would not be acceptable in Eau Claire School District's community is not permitted. Comments that ridicule, exploit, or demean persons on the basis of their sex, race, religion, color, national origin, ancestry, immigration status, creed, pregnancy, marital or parental status, physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, or any other legally recognized protective class under federal, state, or local laws, regulations, or ordinances are strictly prohibited and shall be removed.
Thank you. And finally, 840. Dr. Johnson, if you would close us out.
The district shall not unlawfully discriminate in the acceptance or administration of gifts, bequests, benefits, or services to students, including those from private agencies, organizations, or persons, on the basis of sex, race, religion, color, national origin, ancestry, immigration status, creed, pregnancy, marital or prenatal status, physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression.
Thank you, everyone. Are there comments or questions regarding these proposed changes? Dr. Bika.
At least on the one I read, which was 821, gender identity, it was just misspelled. So just a spell check on all of them, I suppose.
Thank you. We'll definitely take care of that. Or it will probably be Maida that will take care of that. And thank you, Maida. I don't want to claim that I will do that particular work. Other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll forward these as well to the consent agenda for our next meeting. At this time, I would ask for requests for future agenda items.
I have one.
Commissioner,
I think. So I'm kind of wondering, it's funny that Steve brought up literacy and literacy also, you know, has just come out. It came up it was in the Leader Telegram. We were referencing our literacy efforts. And as a new board member who's not seen or had a presentation on literacy, and there's a lot of evidence that links literacy directly to equity, that is really the gateway. And it's just come up enough times now in my brain that I keep wanting to know the data. I keep wanting to know where we're at and what we do, and I don't actually know that as a board member. And so I would kind of like to know where we have been, where we're trying to go, how we're trying to get there, and just where our district stands. And obviously COVID puts a big wrench in that, right? But I think it's a worthwhile thing. It's a worthwhile thing to know. And I don't know how we go about knowing that.
Sounds like a potential use of that learning session.
Sure.
Sort of action that Steve was talking about. Other requests for agenda items? Nine o'clock on the dot, I would hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Good night, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Good night. Thank you.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the Eau Claire Area School Board.